But like Yoshi, I am here to aid you in your journey. Anything you need.
It has to do with Ko.
Anything but that.
You don't...
Do you like Avatar? Not that Avatar, damn it. Do you like Avatar? I thought so. Do you heavily dislike the Avatar movie? I thought so too. Do you think a bit more violence and heavily switching up the events is something the show desperately needed? Well, then I've got good news for you, because the new Avatar show on Netflix is more violent, it changes up the events, and it's not even close to being as bad as the movie. Unfortunately, it's still not that good. I think the question is, how do you remake something so perfect? How do you take something so legendary, easily top 5 animated shows, and somehow justify a live-action remake? The common answer here is you don't, obviously, but to me, it's not that simple. I could rant about the fact that this even exists, like many have already likely done, but I don't believe a decent adaptation is as impossible as you may think. Take a look at The Last of Us on HBO. I know it's a video game, but it's a very story-driven video game, so while making a series seemed relatively simple, it did run the risk of being too much like it and not having a reason to exist. It definitely had flaws and was unsuperior in the end, but that was okay. The reason it's okay is because despite being similar in many ways, it provided something unique by changing up the events and giving the characters slightly different personalities. I do think this led to a few issues toward the end, you can check out my full analysis on that, but for the most part the stuff that had to be kept was kept, and the stuff that had to be changed was changed. It wasn't perfect, the game was still better, but the fact is, it's not the game. Just like this is not the original, and I was open to the idea of them doing something different, probably not being as good, but at least being somewhat unique. Such ideas began to diminish after the original creators walked off, due to creative differences, and while I can't factually link those, I've got a feeling I know why that happened. Let's also not forget that unlike The Last of Us, they had to cram in a lot more into 8 episodes, so changes were definitely needed. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, and sometimes, or in this case most of the time, resulted in an unsuperior version and the overall feeling that something else had to be cut. I do want to stress it's not a complete failure, there are things to like about it, but again, the negatives are not just down to this being an adaptation. Even if you're one of the 3% who have not seen the original, it's still not that great, but in the same vein, there are a few examples of this being altered in an intelligent way. Unfortunately, not that many, and the problems do go beyond what I've said here, so let's just get into it and see if there's anything to like. Okay, it's different. Alright, it's different. So, check that off. A plus side to this, aside from it being different, is we get to see the bending right off the bat, and it does look pretty good. He's trying to get a message to the Earth King about the Fire Nation's plan, and given that he's clearly capable and his friend is right there, he should have no issue escaping. Or he'll block himself off and charge head in. That works too. You could have just put the wall in front of you, or beat their face in with a rock. Last I checked, that will kill you. Instead he's captured, and we see Fire Lord Sozin, played by Hiro Kanagawa. He explains that the warning was actually part of his plan, to divert the attention of all the other nations as a distraction, because he has plans for something bigger. And then this happens.
Because it is our time.
Yeah, another significant change. The fire is no longer something that only knocks you backwards. I mean, it is sometimes, but if the plot needs it to be, people will burn to death in this, and I think that's a good thing. If you're gonna make something live action, you may as well benefit from that, and it does make things look more serious. Again, I'm not knocking the original, but it is a welcome change. So, in case you by any chance have not seen the original, the plan is to kill the Avatar, and since they don't know who he is yet, every airbender must die.
The one person with the ability to master all 4 elements.
That is, aside from Avatar Korra, who can get most of that done immediately. Do they realize how fucking stupid that was? We then see Aang, or as Shyamalan would say, Aang, played by Gordon Cormier, and Gyatso, played by Lim Kei-soo.
Show off.
What? I was just enjoying the bit.
You've probably noticed the significant change that we start out here, opposed to the iceberg, and the fact that he's the Avatar is immediately made apparent. This is already somewhat problematic, as when they do find him, we already know exactly who he is, making it a lot less interesting. But I could probably look past that, if not for some other questionable choices. As expected, he's told he has to leave and train and save the world and all that, but he's not exactly devastated this time. He's not happy about it, it's the whole I didn't ask for this deal, but again, I'm okay with some changes.
I don't want to leave. I don't want the responsibility. I'm scared of my power. I'm scared of being alone.
What I'm not okay with is Aang deciding to fly into the oncoming storm to think, and that being the reason why he's not there. One of the biggest moments from at least the first season, the conflict that he's somewhat responsible because he ran away, is now gone. Instead, it was just bad luck. No reason to feel guilty, no idea of selfishness. It doesn't mean you can't pretend it's still that way, as he will blame himself anyway on multiple occasions, but yeah, this is pretty awful. Like I said, there's being different, which they've done, and then there's changing stuff for the sake of changing stuff. This is the bastardization of one of the most important moments in the show, which is notably dumb, even if you don't know what the hell this show is.
I'm just being realistic.
On the bright side, this does mean we get to see the attack, and it's pretty damn cool. The fire actually killing people, the heavily implied death of children. It's war, it's the way it is, and the whole thing is real well done. The fight scenes are one of the better parts of the series, but unfortunately there's not a whole lot of them. But when they happen, they definitely happen. We then cut ahead 100 years, and see Katara, played by... who in this version can barely bend yet, and Sokka, played by Ian Ousley. As you know, I am willing to look on the positive side of things, despite what we just saw, and I will give the creators the utmost credit on not making this diverse. I am sorry to all of you who can't comprehend this, but this show is set in an Asian setting, so, naturally, they're Asian. This should be fucking obvious, but given what we've seen lately, I have to give them some credit on not messing with this. Obviously, Asians don't count as being diverse, because why should they? And if you're really offended by this series, or even me saying this, then fuck the hell off. The other thing that stands out to me, that you'll also notice more of as we go, is how good the characters look.
Proves if you want something done right, you gotta do it yourself.
Yeah, they just don't appreciate your incredible leadership skills.
The casting really is how I'd imagine them looking in real life, and between that and the fight scenes, I really wish the whole thing could be as good. Unfortunately, no, as like I said, the moment when they find the Avatar is not as meaningful, and we're then introduced to Prince Zuko, played by Dallas Liu, with a significantly less cool-looking scar. Well, anyhow, they also make Sokka into an asshole for a few minutes as he wants to leave Aang to freeze to death, but he's not really an asshole in this at all. He just is when he needs to be because it's the first episode, and I guess that just couldn't be changed. Thing is, it kind of should have been, because in this version, things happen a bit faster. Upon Aang waking up, it really feels like an attempt to cram in as much as they can, so a lot of important things get cut, and to rectify this, we have more questionably dumb changes. What I mean by this is, instead of finding his friends all dead later, he just finds out right now because they know about it, essentially ruining that scene to come. And the reason for this is so Aang cannot tell them he's the Avatar, giving Sokka a reason to be mad when he finds out he is, and the original reason for Sokka being mad, being the trap they accidentally set off, leading Zuko to them, is no longer a thing. Instead, he just knows automatically, but even though they have no time to kick Aang out, and he's still there when Zuko shows up, they still send Sokka out alone to probably die. With my piece of plastic, I will smite thee. You see how the whole thing just doesn't flow as good? Changes that don't benefit in any way, things still happening way too fast. That's a pattern you'll want to get used to. Like the original, Aang saves him, but even though he seems, again, more than capable, he gives up.
I think you're the bravest person I've ever met.
Apart from wanting to leave me to freeze to death, and trying to turn me in, aside from that, a real hero. They immediately go after him, and Iroh, or Shyamalan would say Iroh, played by Sun-Hyung Lee, is not ruined in this.
Others believe that true stability in this world can only happen under our rule. So the drive to conquer is a drive for peace and unity.
Yes, this is actually a very good rendition of a fan-favorite character, and probably the favorite of many. He does a great job portraying him, and like I said, positives do exist here. The remainder of the episode is not one of them, though, as the escape is drastically cut down. He does steal Zuko's notebook containing information of past avatars, but aside from that, he just leaves. They do eventually do something, but in a scene that I skipped over, Katara does learn some waterbending, so it doesn't work, and we have just enough time to cram in another episode. And yes, I know that has to be a thing, but this one really is irrelevant now. We already know they're dead. The Avatar state thing still happens because it has to. In this case, telling them to stop is good enough. They don't need any of that "we're your family now" shit. And with that, we can finally move on to episode 2 of 8, which is entirely devoted to one episode of the original. Must be real damn good, I guess. After convincing Sokka not to give up, the CGI version of Momo incidentally points out that Gran did leave her the waterbending scroll, introduced a lot sooner this time. But what's funny about this is the scene when she says goodbye to them is shown in this episode, in a flashback. Why is that? Anyway, they head to Kyoshi Island to learn more about the Avatar state by visiting Kyoshi's statue, one of Aang's past lives, and they're immediately ambushed by the Kyoshi warriors. The difference this time is despite knowing he's the Avatar, aside from one moment when they kind of don't, but just ignore that, they still don't want them there because it could attract some unwanted attention, and that does make sense. Obviously, given we know how it turns out, so we'll have to see how they handle it here. Spoiler, it's wrong. Something else you may have noticed by now is anything that would hint at Sokka being sexist is gone. Because as you know, if you say something sexist, there's no going back ever. And while I really don't care about that, the way they rectify it is beyond baffling. In the original, Sokka would act like he was superior, get beat, apologize for being an asshole, and eventually they would train together and so on. With this, Suki, played by Maria Zhang, decides to insult Sokka for absolutely no reason.
Personally, I take that responsibility very seriously. I'm the guardian of my village too, so.
You, a guardian. So how are you protecting your people if you're here?
Yeah, leaving his home to save the world. How selfish. Then, after seeing him without a shirt on, she's immediately in love, I guess. And after finding Sokka doing nothing wrong, minding his own business, she challenges him to a fight even though he doesn't ask for it.
Okay.
And by fight, I mean attacking him when he's still getting into position. Because strong woman? Don't know if you know this, but the original already has that. After this, he just walks away. I don't know if we're meant to believe he's embarrassed. Personally, I think he's just confused, or in my case, disturbed. And then it's the same deal. He shows up, they train, nobody says anything this time because I don't think even they know what's going on here. But how the fuck is this better than sexism? I'm fine with it not being a thing, by all means do something different, but you've basically taken those moments and replaced them with one of the coolest female characters acting like she has to prove something. Sokka never does anything wrong, he never says anything mean. They were so intent on making sure nothing sexist was said, they forgot to think of something new. A simple idea would have just been they like each other, fall in love, and that's it. But since she has to look superior, and the events leading up to that had to be removed, this is what we get. Makes absolutely no sense, and is easily the show's dumbest moment. Yeah, the first episode wasn't that great, but this is the worst by far.
I'm just being realistic.
Despite what I said earlier, we are also introduced to Commander Zhao in this episode, played by Ken Leung, who may be the most different character.
Please forgive our lapses as well. We don't get many VIP visitors around here, much less the famed Dragon of the West.
Given that he's mainly considered a joke by the fan base, they've kind of doubled down on that and made that obvious from the beginning. He's not a complete idiot, but he's clearly not to be trusted, and I do kind of like that change. It makes for a somewhat comedic character. It honestly took me a minute to even realize that was meant to be him, but personally I feel it's a good way to make things a bit different. I'm sure some people don't like this, but I don't think it's something to lose sleep over. He again finds out Zuko found the Avatar and lost him, along with the info that he was spotted on Kyoshi Island, leading him to go there with Zuko following. Meanwhile, Aang manages to enter the Avatar state again, in which he meets Kyoshi to ask for advice, but given that Zhao and Zuko have shown up and their men are attacking the village, the advice is down to put your duties above all else and don't run away again, even though that's not what happened. The moment when Sokka and Zuki fend them off is pretty damn good. I just wish their dynamic wasn't ruined, but you can't deny this is a pretty badass moment. The ending is a bit different too, as Kyoshi just takes over Aang's body to drive them off, and while that is kind of cool, there isn't really any consequences this time. No guilt in the fact that they caused it, it's literally pointed out that it's not a big deal.
There's nothing here that we've lost that can't be replaced.
And as you've likely noticed, the Unagi is also absent. In fact, a whole lot is cut from this. I know they added a few things too, but how exactly do you take a 20-minute episode, double the length, and somehow make things worse? It's okay though, because this is funny.
Really? I feel like I walked into that one.
And Zhao supposedly joins them, but in reality sends a message to Fire Lord Ozai, played by Daniel Dae Kim.
The Avatar has returned.
Introduced a lot sooner than expected, and remains to be seen if that'll be a good thing. But that does conclude the worst part of the show, which oddly enough is the only episode like it. From this point on, a lot more things get combined, and it primarily takes 2 episodes to conclude whatever's happening, like with the next 2 focusing on Omashu. That is, of course, after introducing Princess Azula, played by Elizabeth Yu, again, way sooner than expected. As you'll see with the Omashu segment, things are a lot different. Yes, after the last 2 episodes, I could easily see them cutting out the Cabbage Merchant. But they don't. It's changed a bit, but it's fine. The actual difference is they head there thinking they spotted an airbender, but upon sneaking inside they find it's Teo from a completely different episode, and after a random explosion supposedly made by the Fire Nation, they meet his dad, Sai, played by Danny Pudi.
Pretty great, huh? Dad's the mechanist to the king of Omashu.
Mechanist?
Just a fancy word for someone who wastes a lot of time tinkering.
Obviously this is completely different, but I'm okay with that here, as the mechanist plot is pretty much interchangeable. The same can be said for Jet, played by Sebastian Amorso, meaning the Freedom Fighters plot will also be thrown in. And again, the casting really is perfect. Even Mei and Ty Lee, who don't really do anything in this season, look exactly how you think they should. What doesn't look as it should is the Freedom Fighters' hideout, as it's no longer in the trees. Not exactly foolproof, but whatever. And the various members don't do much here either, so no update there. Like the original, they see Psy giving designs to the Fire Nation, meaning things are not what they seem. But the thing is, we know Jet is also not exactly good, and after Aang and Teo find the blasting jelly and accuse him, it leads to what I consider to be one of the show's more intelligent scenes.
No, Jet's not the bad guy. Psy is.
Are you kidding me? Psy's done nothing but help us. Well, Jet's a con artist who lied to our faces.
They've taken two side characters, each of which are kind of liked by a different main character, and despite knowing they're both liars, we don't really know who did this because they introduced them both at the same time. This is easily my favorite part of the show for reasons like this, and the last thing that I expected was they'd actually find a way to make it so you don't know what's going on. I mean, you do to a point, obviously unavoidable, but given what this is based on, this is pretty damn impressive. Also, this show actually can be funny at times.
To prove you're a jerk.
Oh, yeah? Well, I don't need proof of that.
The only thing is, since this is a show, it has to immediately be resolved, and we learn that Jet plans on blowing up the Mechanist along with the King because corruption. We have the whole "some people must be sacrificed" line, and if you want to know how I would fix this, maybe don't make Jet bad. I mean, you did say some stuff in the previous scene that was a bit different, like telling Katara to focus more on positivity to learn waterbending, so it would have been a much more unique take to actually make him good this time. Instead, the dilemma's resolved immediately, but I guess I'll take what I can get. We also learn that Zhao and Azula are working together, another interesting change I think, and upon trying to stop the explosion, we see Zuko and Iroh have snuck inside. This leads to a somewhat unique fight, as obviously Zuko can't firebend, more on the comedic side, and that's okay. But he can't stick to that, giving us our favorite line.
My commentary!
This is genius. Best episode, no question. What's not genius is how they stop the explosion. I know the relevancy of the water whip, but no. And it concludes with Aang and Iroh being captured while Zuko escapes. This allows the two to have an engaging conversation because, like I said, his character is good in this. And after confirming that Psy did give the Fire Nation weapons in exchange for their safety, we have another pretty good combination of episodes. The main focus here is on King Bumi, played by good luck, who for me is kind of a mixed bag. On one hand, his personality is spot on. Again, exactly what you'd expect.
Pine bark, dried jasmine, scalding hot water, steep for 2 minutes. And you're wrong about him.
We witnessed the bending.
Wrong!
And the big change this time is his identity is no longer a secret. He knows he's his old friend Bumi immediately, making the events to come all the more unexpected. We'll get to those in a few minutes. And even though I haven't been keeping track of all the references in this show because I don't really care, the two rock statues of his pet Flopsy are a nice touch. I also like the fact that they address how he's still alive, being good help, I guess. But the big downside to this is how it all ends. Not much happens with them throughout the episode. It's more focused on the other plots, to be honest. They do have their big duel at the end, which sadly is not as good as the original, but still okay. And then more of this shit.
You left us. You were the Avatar. And you left us.
So we're gonna keep pretending it was a decision and not an accident. Do you realize it's not the same show? We then find out that Bumi is not fucking around this time, and he gives him the ultimatum to let him die to prove he can make hard choices. Such choices won't have to be made though, as Katara and Sokka have shown up. They got there by adapting the whole tunnel episode, which was okay. Mostly the same thing, pretty engaging stuff. There's a point when they have an argument for basically no reason, aside from plot, and the whole Jet thing is concluded for this season in a relatively lazy fashion, so now they can work together and save the day.
You cheated! You didn't do it on your own, so you didn't learn anything at all!
No, don't even try to act like it's gonna go in that direction. We know what's gonna happen. They convince Bumi of the magic of friendship, a good alternative to hard decisions, and everything ends on good terms. You know, I don't expect this show to actually have Aang kill Bumi or anything that dark, but don't fucking hint at it. Again, I like his character and all that, but don't take us into such a different direction to have it end the exact same way. What if those two hadn't shown up? Then what? You can't just say it's a given. If you don't want to do anything different, fine, but don't make the whole episode that way and then back out because you're afraid to go through with it. And no, copy and pasting the final scene and more of that cabbage stuff does not make it okay. Despite this, I still consider these 2 episodes to be the show's highlight because the Zuko section is mostly an improvement. It adapts the section when he saves Iroh from the Earthbenders, but it's a bit more in-depth this time.
My brother, though. He had a soft heart. He was on watch. The night you torched the Eastern Wall. By the time we put the fires out, there was nothing left of him to bury.
We were at war. I was a soldier. You were a butcher.
Again, the benefit of being able to focus on more mature themes. It's a really well done moment, and not something I thought the show could pull off. The scene with his dead son is also real good, giving him and Zuko more development that originally didn't happen this early on, and it's just amazing how well their dynamic works. The original had that too, it just took longer, and that's okay of course, but I guess given that this, at one time, could have not had a second season, which wasn't likely, it would have made it a good thing to let us see this now. If it wasn't fitting in, I wouldn't be saying that, but again, like the original, the stuff with them is still superior. Unfortunately, the fight with the Earthbenders is again not as good, it's more like they just win this time, but getting to see Iroh join Zuko after being banished was a brilliant inclusion.
Everything I need is on this boat. Like I said, all the tea I need.
It's the reason I can't say this show was a complete failure. There is stuff to undoubtedly like, but with that, the best of it is past, and we move into the meh section. That being the spirit world, which is a different take on it. But first, I want to address what they did with Azula in this. In the original, she was always in control and overly confident, while in this, it's not really anything like that. Aside from assisting Zhao, or in this case, convincing Ousley to send him the archers, all she really does is complain about Zuko seemingly getting more attention.
Zhao didn't discover the Avatar, Zuko did. That's what I expect from a future heir. Not self-serving flattery and coy whispers.
There's definitely more depth to that, and we'll talk about this more as we go, but for the time being, it's a lot less unique. Nothing about this reminds me of the old character, but I guess that could potentially change. Also, her fire isn't blue. No good. So the gang comes across the burnt forest, and after seeing the Fire Nation was responsible, he blames himself yet again. It does make a bit more sense this time, as he admits he doesn't know what he's doing, and at least it's not somebody else making the allegation. They head to a nearby village to learn people have gone missing, and decides to enter the spirit world to bring them back. Only problem is this time they all get sucked in because...
Must be the energies in the place and thinness up the barrier in my power.
Plot reasons. And after wandering around for a bit, they come across the owl, because I guess the library episode won't be needed in season 2, and eventually the vengeful spirit Heibai, in which he realizes he can't bend. But you can hit the like button down below. I mean, you made it this far, so why not? And unless you're a defender of this series, subscribe. Then again, does this series have any defenders yet? So due to him having no bending, this goes badly, all of them being separated, and Sokka encounters a talking fox spirit. It'll make sense later. After this, the two relive memories from their past, one of which is pretty good, and one kind of isn't. In Katara's case, it's the death of her mother, which I haven't really talked about yet, and it's definitely a significant change, as the original didn't show any of this till near the end. Emphasis on show, as it is slightly shown, and the fact that Katara's bending may be what caused it creates an element of guilt that so far has been kind of missing. Also, she actually witnessed it. Pretty traumatizing. And to be honest, this is an improvement to the original that showed us this through multiple flashbacks. It was still good, but in this case, this may be slightly better.
Are you out of your fucking mind?
Sokka, on the other hand, in which we go back to his ice-dodging trials, a completely new thing, is something I wish wasn't added. The idea is he messed up, but they passed him anyway because his dad felt bad for him, I guess. And then he overhears him saying he's not cut out to lead. I don't really know what the point of this is, aside from needing a sad memory. His character is actually less dumb in this, and the implication that his dad would even do this is kind of out of character. Don't know how they'd handle this when they eventually meet later. It doesn't really seem needed, but maybe I'm missing something. Aang eventually encounters Ko, the face stealer, voiced by George Takei, who is much more antagonistic in this.
Now why would I let you play with my food?
Well, that's pretty damn terrifying. This would be the fellow who captured Aang's friends, along with the missing villagers, and after escaping he runs into Gyatso, who apparently really is him. He tells him that Ko previously encountered Avatar Roku, who stole something from him, and he decides to visit his shrine to ask for help. He also tells him that if he hadn't run away, he would have been killed, so that's a thing. But again, in this series, that's irrelevant. The episode also introduces the bounty hunter June, played by Arden Cho, who Iroh hires to find the Avatar, and also this moment that's kind of weird.
But the Avatar, that's what those pirates said.
No, it wasn't the pirates. It was that canyon guy. He said Avatar fought off some canyon crawlers.
So, are we supposed to believe these things happened, but they just didn't show it? Because obviously not seeing it all is understandable, especially because The Great Divide is the most hated episode. But if you, for some reason, hadn't seen the original, you wouldn't know that, and the pirate theme does sound pretty cool. So now we get to the only part of the show that feels like it's kind of trying to cram in too much. Not only is it the episode that covers Zuko's backstory, we'll get to that in a minute, but a lot of stuff happens in this one before even reaching the halfway point. First off, Zhao is promoted to Admiral, taking over Zuko's ship and his crew, which they have no issue going along with. I personally don't know how people feel about Zhao in this, but I do kind of like this scene.
I'll come by later to discuss a few personnel changes I'd like to make. Until then, carry on.
And Aang travels to Crescent Island to talk to Avatar Roku, played by C.S. Lee. Obviously, not a lot of time devoted to this. I'm a bit confused with the direction they took this character in.
And to avert your eyes and hop on one leg?
But the conclusion they come to is if he just gives Ko back his statue, he'll probably let them all go. The possibility that he won't is not considered, but upon leaving, he's captured by June. I like how June's personality is just not giving a shit, knowing that what she's doing will likely have consequences. It's how you'd expect her character to be.
You just sit back and wait for the dust to clear and then pick through the broken pieces for the leftovers. As far as I'm concerned, the world's just fine the way it is.
I also like how she commonly mentions Iroh being cute, but given the fact that they know Zhao's men are after them, why didn't she just take him to the ship? He's immediately taken by Zhao, couldn't have been helped I guess, and before taking him to the stronghold, he tells him exactly where he's going, followed by Iroh telling Zuko it's impenetrable. Why would you add this? He breaks in the exact same way he did in the original, which is fine, but it doesn't look fucking impenetrable. Also, the possibility that this could not be Zuko is also gone. And with this episode about half over, we've already crammed in what is, in my opinion, too much. I'm not saying it's an easy task to fit this in, but the pacing just isn't that good. The rest of the episode is okay though, Zhao's speech being more comedic. The escape is entertaining enough, he's again knocked out, but the conversation they have is a bit more extended. He's by no means unconscious this time. They actually talk about stuff, mainly the events that led to his banishment, and I'm okay with what they do here. Maybe a bit controversial, but let's not forget the original episode that did this also had Aang's backstory, which is gone, but for what it is, I don't think they did a bad job. Like the original, Zuko speaks out about the general's plan, in this case to sacrifice the 41st Division, and as punishment he must duel his own father. As you'd expect, the whole thing is a bit more lengthy, but again, I don't feel anything is ruined here. This time, Zuko has a chance to win, but can't go through with it, and him being burned slowly is a reasonable change. One thing I did notice is Azula looking more surprised by it, while in the original, she clearly enjoyed it, hinting at what I mentioned earlier. He sentences him to find the Avatar, and a little thing they added is upon Iroh telling the crew about this, it's revealed they were the 41st Division.
We're the 41st. And you're all alive because of my nephew's sacrifice.
I kind of love the moment when the crew realizes Zuko's the only reason they're alive. I hate to admit this, but this is better than what the original did. It's not said that often, it probably won't be said again, but there are some improvements here. Unfortunately, so much of the episode is spent on this, there's not much time for anything else, and in the end he attacks Aang anyway, and he sends him back to his ship on the boat. The moment when his men finally respect him is also quite good, but I still want to know what would happen if the statue wasn't good enough. He doesn't even say anything, he just gives it to him and everybody's released. What if he said, "Fuck you"? So on to the North Pole stuff, not quite as meaningful as the trip there doesn't feel that long, and if the first 2 episodes were the worst part, I'd say the last 2 are a close second. Let's count down the things that aren't as good. Zhao's attempt to kill Zuko takes place in a little boat this time, opposed to the whole ship, because who needs that? The fact that the North Pole is going to be attacked is revealed immediately, killing any suspense, because suspense is for losers. And you really won't believe this.
I'm sorry, but women don't fight. We use our skills to heal, not to harm.
I'm sorry?
You're not strong enough. Women aren't strong enough.
So, you're telling me that Master Paku, played by A. Martinez, and the whole fucking North Pole still won't let women fight? You got rid of the arranged marriage thing, that's optional now. You completely destroyed Suki's character because the alternative might offend somebody. But a whole society, when women aren't allowed to fight, is okay with you? Obviously it won't stay that way, but since when do you give a shit about that? I can't for the life of me understand how the North Pole isn't deemed sexist forever, because get this, unlike the original, it's not even done well this time. They do eventually fight, but it's not done in anger, she just challenges him and that's that. The fight is noticeably less cool this time, they don't even leave the same area. And since the arranged marriage stuff is too sexist for this society, the whole thing about Gran is gone, and instead everybody just likes Katara because she lost. Look, I tried to give the show some credit, but how does this happen? How does stuff get changed to the point of being cringeworthy, while this feels like them trying to see how confusing they can make things without ruining it? The answer to that is a lot less than this. I really don't get this one.
I'm just being realistic.
Grasping onto any positives, I do think Zhao's character is still funny.
I swear I will not rest until I hunt down these villains. Our enemies can't be allowed to get away with such a brazen crime.
I'm sorry, I really do like him. And the rest is your basic stuff. Sokka is oddly enough still allowed to be in love with Yue, played by Amber Mithunder, despite clearly being in love with Zuki. And yes, she is the fox from earlier due to the moon spirit giving her life when she was sick, and I don't give a damn at this point. Aang again seeks out a past life for help, this time being Kuruk, played by Meegwin Fairbrother, but he can't help because he's corrupted and shit, but that's okay. Despite getting the same advice that he must do it himself, he has his friends, and that's enough. So with Iroh telling Zhao invading the North Pole is a bad idea, and Zuko shockingly not being dead, everything's ready for the big finale. Aside from Azula bending lightning, proving herself to Ozai because that has to happen for Season 2, now we're ready for the big finale. It's not that good. The only big difference here is the usage of the air balloon to sneak inside, and he tells Iroh about his plans to kill the moon spirit. They do go out of their way this time to explain the spirits deliberately becoming visible on this night, which is dumb because this could happen. But I guess you'd rather have pointless exposition like this instead of stuff that we just don't need to see. Like the memorable scene with Zuko sneaking inside. Most of that's gone, but who cares? Given that he never catches Aang this time, he's irrelevant to most of what happens here anyway. But that's not what you came to see. Instead, we have an extension of the sexist stuff.
I thought I made myself clear. Women are not allowed in combat.
I thought I showed you how stupid that is.
That's right, it's not even over yet. He has to be told again in the middle of the battle with a bunch of women standing under him wanting to fight. All I can figure is they really want him to be an asshole in this. Maybe in the original he was just misguided and thought women were unsuperior, and in this it's just a custom that he won't break. I don't know. But this is just so fucking stupid. CGI Momo gets fatally injured, kind of forgot he was a thing, so they go to the Oasis to save him, mainly because the climax needs him to be there. Katara and Zuko have their fight again, and as you'd very, very likely guess, the reason she easily beats him is not because of the moon this time, even though it easily could have been. It's because she's a master now, which must have happened off screen, I guess. Maybe it was those few people saying she was great for losing, but last I checked, this happened right after, so I guess that fight made her real good?
Because I think you're a sexist, misogynist dinosaur.
So again, the big issue is, things happen way too fast. The episode not even half over, and we've already reached this big moment, so aside from this impeccable line,
Master of three elements doesn't quite have the same ring to it.
nothing will happen to make up for this. The whole scene isn't even as good as Zhao doesn't even consider letting it go, and after killing the moon spirit, resulting in chaos, you know the drill by now, I couldn't help but notice a couple of Zhao's men not leaving. Don't know what that's about. However, when I said nothing good happens to make up for this, I kind of lied, as the next scene is pretty epic. That being the scene when they breach the walls is real damn cool. I especially like this moment when the guy thinks he's getting away and is then fucked. It's exactly how this kind of thing should look, I just wish what led up to it was at the same level of quality. Things are a bit different here, as when Aang becomes the spirit monster, there's not really any hope of getting out of it, making for a more desolate situation. And watching him destroy the ships one by one is a good final battle this show did not deserve. Like always, the stuff with Zuko and Iroh is the best, despite Zuko not doing much in this episode, and the final confrontation with Zhao brings a shocking revelation.
It was a sham. Did you really think the Fire Lord was gonna take you back? It was all a game. And the winner is the one without the scar from Daddy. Ozai was just using you as motivation for your sister.
Wow. I didn't see that coming. And given that Ozai has been a bit nicer, you know, compared to the original, this is kind of a clever twist. I don't know if it warrants making Azula completely different. We'll have to see how that turns out, but yeah, I can't deny the effect of this scene. What's not as effective as Zhao's death, I'm sorry, but it just isn't. And Yue, who can, by the way, waterbend in this, and still can at this point, sacrifices herself to save the moon, because it gave her life and all that. Well, it's a good thing I have two bitches. Suki need not know about this. So, I think this is what allows Aang to stop, not the power of love bullshit. But then again, something that cliche seems hard to resist here. But anyway, slightly more depressing ending. This time Zuko is still tired despite not almost freezing to death, or much of anything. We went from a realistic feeling of exhaustion in which he literally laid down on the ship to you row and I'll watch, and Pakku gives Katara the special Oasis water.
In that case, he couldn't have asked for a better master.
Are you just saying that because you're cancelled? Oh yes. Well, there's still your season 3 cameo. No. But most importantly, Aang finally decides to stop focusing on the past and look toward the future.
He told me, let go of the past, or I'll never have a future.
It only took a whole season to get to that conclusion, something the original did in one episode, and with that, he actually did something wrong. Finally, it's revealed that the true plan was to take over Omashu, with Azula leading, and this whole thing was merely a distraction. We also learn about Sozin's Comet, which will give them additional power, just in case you forgot. But that is it for the first live-action season of Avatar, and It has its moments. I can't say I completely hate it, but probably didn't need to exist. Stuff like character personalities, how they look, and the fight scenes in general are pretty good, aside from maybe a few things feeling unsuperior, but the main issue comes down to the story not being as good, and not really working even if you don't know anything about the original. It kind of depends on which episode you're watching, blatantly stupid changes, a baffling concept of sexism, and the last two are also quite flawed, giving us a finale that just isn't as good. Characters almost feeling pointless, scenes that can't compete with their predecessor, and the pacing just isn't as good here. Some parts do work, the two Omashu episodes easily being my favorite, with intelligently combined plots, giving us some, dare I say, innovative new scenes, but the flaws are still there. You still have stuff not being implemented properly, like Jet's plot being too rushed, and the conclusion being what I consider a cop-out, but it's about as good as this show gets. Even though it's not the movie, I still stand by 8 episodes not being enough to fit in a whole season, and a few more things should have been cut or at least reworked. Like the original, Zuko and Iroh have the best arc, mostly good or in some cases superior to the original, and as you know, I really like what they did with Zhao. The stuff with Azula and Ozai could be an improvement, we'll need a second season to know. I am open to the idea that it could be a good thing. Again, there is stuff to like, but the baffling decision making and what seems to be an obsession with changing whatever they can is really the show's downfall. Not enough thought was put in, most of it was just done to do it, and in the end it's no surprise the creators walked out. Some may say it's good as a standalone series, but I really can't say it accomplishes that either. A lot of flaws I've mentioned are still apparent, even if you somehow don't know what this is. It's not a complete failure, but what's bad really is bad. It may not be the movie, because nothing could be, but I can't actively recommend this. A couple of good fight scenes and faithful designs don't make it worth the while, and if the show's future is anything based on the ratings, which aren't that great, this could actually be the second time Book 1 gets retold and fails to get past it, and a double season renewal. Well, I would have found that real amusing, and it would have definitely been a sign, third sign actually, that Avatar should have probably been left alone. I'm the analyst, and remember kids, sexism is bad, but you can change, even if modern media says you can't. So, you've made it to the end. That's an impressive feat indeed. Since you managed that, I guess check out the gaming channel, in which I cover a variety of gaming topics, like analysis videos, such as this one. If you're into that, then press the link in the description. It's that simple.